Welcome to the Compliance 911 Show, a no-nonsense podcast discussing hot topics for today's busy compliance professional. It's everything you wanted to know about regulatory compliance, but we're afraid to ask. And now, here are your hosts, Dean Stockford of M&M Consulting and Len Suzio of GeoData Vision.
Good morning, Dean. Great to see you again. So what great topic did you bring to the discussion today?
Hi, Len, and it's always a pleasure to see you. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that affects every corner of a financial institution in compliance management, or I should say probably compliance management systems. I thought I'd focus on CMS in times of evolving regulatory priorities out of Washington.
Well, boy, that's a perfect topic in light of all the uncertainty about changing regulations and the political headwinds in Washington these days.
Yeah, I agree, Len. And at its core, compliance management in banking ensures that a financial institution is following the rules, the local laws, the federal laws, the regulations, of course, internal policies and procedures. But it's more than just checking off boxes. I mean, I think that's critical to emphasize with our audience. But I like to equate CMS to a conductor who makes sure that every section of the orchestra plays in harmony. Obviously, without the conductor, that does not occur. So you're, as the compliance professional manager running your responsibilities of your CMS, it's imperative that you have cohesiveness in all aspects of your CMS. That's exactly what compliance does, and it certainly takes all of the departments to be aligned. Of course, the risk monitored and operations, legal and ethical working all together. Compliance management basically has three essential elements, and I think this is where people sometimes say, well, that's not that much. I mean, that looks really easy, but you have to drill into each one of these elements, I think, in order to fully understand. Board and management oversight, the governance structure overall in the institution is critical. Making sure that there's an appropriate tone at the top is I think, and a commitment from upper management is critical. A compliance program itself, obviously, there should be an overall risk assessment. The regulators want you to tell them where the level of risk is, compliance risk relative to your operations. And so, you have to have an appropriate risk assessment, policies and procedures that are designed in such a way where you make brief, bold policy statements, but have clear step action procedures so that when somebody leaves and goes to Hawaii and never comes back, another staff member can pick up that and carry out the functions in compliance with their overall CMS. Training is critical. I mean, I think we sometimes underestimate training significantly, especially when we're looking at compliance management, because we do a lot. We have to build a culture. Ongoing employee training should be crucial, not just an online course that says, oh, well, you passed because you got greater than a 70, or that one that you can take 50 times before, in order to pass it. I think this is critical to get job specific, but also talk about regulatory compliance as well. And that's everybody that it would apply to internally. Monitoring. And I think, over the years, monitoring has been one of those things that's kind of a sidebar, at least in my experience, where there's this reliance on our third-party independent providers audit to conduct audits and to tell us what's wrong. But beyond that is the internal monitoring that needs to occur on behalf of management. And regulators certainly are moving towards a principle-based guidance rather than, prescriptive rules giving more flexibility. And I just think that, again, compliance professionals need to pay attention to their monitoring internally. Of course, consumer complaint management, document and respond. I mean, complaints are critical and can be very helpful at the same time. Of course, compliance, audit, and third-party management is critical as well. We want to know. We want that independent reviewer to come in and tell us how well we're doing with our monitoring, how well we're doing with our compliance, and certainly to identify weaknesses in those areas in advance of a regulator coming in. And then, of course, continuous improvement. We always have to kind of step back and say, how can we do better? I think that's critical, especially, with again, the changes in Washington in the regulatory enforcement. It's not time to let your guard down or become complacent. It's time to find ways to improve our overall quality. And when all these elements are strong and working together, Len, an institution will definitely be successful in managing its compliance responsibilities and risks now and, of course, in the future.
Well, I certainly can see why this area is so important, Dean. With all the changes in regulation and the evolving shifts in enforcement due to the political changes going on in Washington, compliance professionals really need to be on their game.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Lynn. And we've talked about this, you and I, in our circles many, many times. The role of compliance continues to evolve. Again, even though we talk about a repeal or a rescinding of any type of regulatory areas, hey, again, don't be complacent. We're replacing these people, these folks, these general, I'll call them auditors, with a higher level expertise individuals, and it's important, for them to play the role of the compliance management and to make sure that they create stability, ensuring that the financial institutions adheres to regulatory provisions and expectations, even as their internal processes may shift. Strong monitoring and testing, as I just alluded to, overall, we need to make sure that we have that. Identify risk. And of course, I think this is one of the critical things. Sometimes we identify the risk and then forget about it. But we need to flag potential gaps and blind spots in this rapidly changing operational environment. Stress test controls and adjust for, emerging risk indicators that we're seeing. Advise, ensure that from a legal compliance, and of course the risk officers that are at the table provide proactive guidance, leadership, and of course legal, regulatory, reputational, ethical, all the way around. Increase touch points with compliance, risk, audit, IT, operations. Those things are all extremely critical. Maintain a culture, reinforce integrity and consistent decision making rooted in the financial institution's values, and maintain agility without compromising those principles. And of course, it's not all smooth sailing. I mean, it sounds like it is, of course, when we're talking about it. But, we often see silos within some of the larger institutions as compliance monitoring is embedded within those divisions or departments without appropriate connections to the overall compliance management function. So it is important that their compliance management system encompasses the entire enterprise. And in addition to this challenge, they face other challenges, such as constantly changing regulations, increasingly complex financial products that their consumers want, cross-border, compliance with, multiple jurisdictions now, the rise of digital assets and those cryptocurrencies. That is another area that is of high risk. And of course, talent shortages in the compliance function overall. We've certainly experienced that and the challenges of finding highly competent individuals to help us. So it's critical. And those are just a few challenges, but CMS is vital to the success of the financial institution.
Well, based on all those points, your main point appears to be that financial institutions need to stay proactive.
Yes, compliance professionals that find themselves chasing their tails, as they say, are reacting to changes as opposed to proactively managing risk. And this can be a catastrophic to any financial institution.
Dean, can you talk to me for a minute or two about some of the recent shifts in the regulatory priorities?
Of course. In April, the CFPB rescinded enforcement and supervisory priority documents and outlined new priorities for 2025. The new priorities reflect a significant shift in focus, emphasizing on collaboration with the supervised entities, reducing regulatory burdens, and targeting tangible consumer harms. It decreased the overall number of supervisory exams by 50%, which is enormous.
Mhm.
Focus supervision on the largest banks and depository institutions. Prioritize cases involving actual fraud against consumers. And to me, that is just a really huge area. Focus on getting to redress tangible harm to consumers rather than imposing penalties. Of course, prioritize to service members and veterans, especially under the various provisions that are in place now relative to Military Lending Act, Service and Sailors Civil Relief Act. Prioritize participation in multi-state exams where state regulators are already engaged. Eliminate duplicative supervision and coordinate exam timing with other federal regulators. Focus on supervision on areas clearly within the statutory authority and not engage in statistical-based redlining or biased assessment supervision. Pursue only matters with proven discrimination and identified victims. So these are significant and obviously I think music to the eyes of the financial institution, but once again, the reminders of the importance of compliance management and not being complacent. So those are just a few. I could probably talk all day.
And I'm certain it'd be interesting the entire day, but we're going to have to break this up into some bite-sized
Yeah.
discussions for our audience. So what you're saying is consistent with what we are hearing and seeing. Can you maybe just focus for another minute or two and highlight some of the activity from repeals and withdrawals of any rules and any guidance?
Yes, I can. And, sometimes these are a little bit hard to navigate or find, but let me highlight some of the most significant actions, or maybe I should say proposed actions. There are more, but these are what I would view as probably the most significant ones we've seen to date. And of course, the one that's near and dear to your heart, Len, which is the repeal of the interagency CRA rule issued in 2023 and reinstatement of the prior CRA framework prior to that date. That's a big withdrawal of interagency statements regarding crypto asset activities and exposures. I still think we're going to see something relative to that. It's just in a different form. Stay on Section 1071 requirements with intention to reopen the rulemaking. So as we know, that was tied up in litigation, and it seems like they're going to reinforce the stay that was issued. Repeal of the CFPB overdraft fee rule. Once again, I think the bankers are going to be happy about that. A repeal of the credit card late fees rule. A repeal of the payment apps rule. Withdrawal of certain guidance documents. So far, we've seen like 8 different policy statements, 7 interpretive rules, 13 advisory opinions, and 39 other types of guidance documents. So you can see there's a lot happening for sure in the regulatory world.
Yeah, I knew there were a lot of significant actions, but I just had no idea how many. It's been overwhelming to say the least.
Yeah.
So, Dean, as we wrap up today's discussion, do you have any parting words for our audience?
Yeah, I kind of want to bring it full circle back to where I started. As I mentioned earlier, the role of the compliance department or officer in CMS systems continues to evolve. It's important to stay grounded in our values and reiterate those values, avoid shortcuts, don't become complacent, build frameworks, and do that proactively. And of course, communicate, which is critical with all departments, functions, and third parties. In addition, you should remain proactive with monitoring, the regulatory rollbacks, because they're coming at us rather significantly, and we need to make sure that we fully understand those so that we can share with everybody internally. Track emerging regulations, things that perhaps are coming. Monitor state level regulatory trends, because as we know, state regulators are very different, or vastly different, I should say, in many cases from the federal regulatory bodies. Communicate clearly and frequently with all players and departments. And of course, maintain or strengthen those internal policies and procedures, especially in time of change like this, where we have a little bit of an opportunity to perhaps drill into some areas more regularly now that they've repealed or have backed off in certain areas. I think that's critical. Prepare for future regulatory swings or an enhancement in enforcement. I had a discussion this morning with my senior vice president of compliance, and one of the things I was looking at was trending. When you look back at trending with what I call the political swings, when you have Republicans in power versus Democrats in power, where are their areas of focus? And one of the areas that kind of surprised me that popped off with under Republican control was BSA AML. And I think that's because of the stance on law enforcement, and they're going to be looking at that more heavily as we move forward. So, yeah. So again, stay proactive and keep your ears tuned to what's going on in the regulatory area.
Well, I have to indulge you a little bit, or have you indulge me. I have one more question. I promise this is the final question. What do you think are the most significant areas of concern in 2025 for regulatory compliance?
Well, that's a great question, and I always have to preface by saying these are in my opinion, because I think if you talk to risk professionals, these areas could be different depending on who you speak to. But data privacy and cybersecurity risk isn't going away, and as we know, with the fraud that's going on, of course, people's concern relative to what's out there in the public realm, I think that's an area that's going to continue to be significant. Strengthening AML in CTF compliance, as I just indicated with BSA AML rules, I think it's imperative. Digital banking and those evolving regulatory changes around fraud, security, and data protection. I know it seems like every time I turn around, I'm hearing the word fraud. And, it also feels like every other week I'm getting dinged on my own credit card, and I haven't lost it, or I don't have online activity. So it's just amazing. These criminals are getting very, very good. Implementing artificial intelligence and automation and compliance. I think this is a way for financial institutions to analyze large data sets through AI efficiently and effectively, and therefore can implement controls around that. So it will help them as they move forward or navigate their CMS. But like I said, Len, I could go on forever covering these things, but in my opinion, those are the top few bullet points.
Dean, you just got me a bit nervous when you mentioned about your own credit card and getting dinged a few times. I haven't checked my credit card statement for the last month. And now, as soon as this recording is done, I'm going to check out and see what activity has been going on my credit card. So I have my own personal risk management system, basically.
Great idea.
Well, Dean, again, thank you for raising these red flags on compliance management systems and for your invaluable and informative comments today, which I'm certain our listeners appreciate. This is Len Suzio from GeoData Vision.
And this is Dean Stockford from M&M Consulting saying thank you for tuning into today's discussion. And I believe, because it is so lengthy, that perhaps we'll add another version of this. But please let us know of any additional topics you'd like to hear in future episodes. And thank you for tuning in today.
Thanks for listening to the Compliance 911 Show. If you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, please give us a like and review to help others find the show. As always, links are in the show notes, and you can always find us online at compliance911show.com. Follow M&M Consulting and GeoData Vision on LinkedIn for all the latest news and information on compliance hot topics.